Hello, my name is Aileen Gemma Smith, and I'm Head of Developer Relations for Americas and Online at AWS. I'm here in this lightning chat together with Ian Calvert from Further to talk all about leveraging technology to scale sustainable community development. Ian, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Hi, Eileen. Great to be with you.
So, we all have such amazing stories and such amazing backgrounds. Ian, I would love if you could kick off this conversation by telling us not only a bit about the organization Further, but your journey and how you got there.
Sure. Well, Further, first and foremost, is a platform to try and support people in communities around the world who've identified a challenge and are really trying to find the right way of solving it. So whether they're called social entrepreneurs, change makers, ultimately they're the people from those communities who are trying to harness their own creativity and the community resources to solve those problems. And what Further does is really try to harness a community around them, a community of coaches, mentors, experts, storytellers, to really provide them with a kind of the ultimate support team for them to have the impact they want to have in the community. In terms of my own journey, I grew up in the north of England, in the kind of industrialized north, and then somehow found myself living at the tip of Africa in Cape Town. And I think it was that kind of journey, complete sort of contrast of environments,
Yeah.
where I just came across such amazing people in the communities in South Africa, which obviously is more than any other country in the world has had a huge history of social challenges. And having always been an entrepreneur by training,
Mhm.
particularly I was an entrepreneur in the creative industries. What you soon realize is that true creativity does not take place in a boardroom, but it takes place in the necessity of communities trying to find creative solutions to problems. So really what we're about, and I think the thing that I've always been most passionate about is that in this world of doing good,
Yeah.
that we don't, those of us who come from a more privileged background don't act like the saviors and come in and parachute solutions, no matter how well intentioned it may be. The most
Yeah.
important thing is that we give respect and dignity to the people in their own communities and allow them to be the architects of their own solutions, and that we should be there to help, to support, to enable, to empower, but very much to do that from behind so that
Yeah.
these entrepreneurs are really the ones who own the solutions.
Right. So we're supporting that capacity building and how we enable it. And I think a large part of that is the trust that we earn in communities. And I think core to earning that trust, and I know this is something that you and I have chatted quite a bit about, is knowing when to just stand back and listen.
Well, exactly. I think our philosophy has always been that the people closest to the problem should be the
Yeah.
people closest to the solution. And that particularly in the world of tech, often we know what's possible. We know what the new tools are, what the new technology is, and we want to come and use that somehow. But
Right.
often, I'm sure we'll explore a few stories where technology doesn't always have to be the latest version. Um, but I think more importantly, in supporting these entrepreneurs, it's an understanding of how tough that journey is. That it's
Yeah.
not just bringing technical knowledge and skills; it's about supporting them as entrepreneurs. That they've taken on this tough challenge of solving a problem. So not only are they having to succeed as an entrepreneur, they're having to take on board that problem from the community. So supporting them in their own personal well-being, their personal resilience, their resourcefulness, really trying to make them sustainable as individuals makes their projects and businesses more sustainable and ultimately has more sustainable impact.
Absolutely. And let's lean into that because I do agree with you that I think all too often folks are focused on here's the next great thing that's come out, how do we use it, as different from honoring and understanding what does this community need and maybe the solution that resonates isn't the latest and greatest technology. I would love it from your journey and your experience in supporting and enabling others, if we could lean into some examples of that where maybe it wasn't the newest technology that really made a difference.
Yeah, well, there's a great example in our program here in South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
One of the entrepreneurs who joined our program in 2017 is a young guy called Neo Hitiri, and he, in his younger life, suffered badly from tuberculosis, which is a chronic illness which affects a lot of South Africans.
Yeah.
And and those communities, particularly the under-resourced communities where the healthcare system is quite broken, for them to access the chronic medication that they need to keep their TB under control, it often involves standing in queues in clinics for 3 to 4 hours, and often people just end up not waiting, and then they fall off the medication program, and that causes even more problems. So what Neo did was devise a very simple system of automated lockers on the
Mm-hmm.
outside of the clinic, and each locker system would have maybe 100 lockers. And when you, as the patient, when you were told that your medication was going to be ready, you received on your mobile phone a simple SMS. So it wasn't, again, not complicated, new age data. This was simple mobile technology, and you received an SMS with a code, so that when you arrived at this bank of lockers, you key in your code and it tells you, pick up your medication from locker 17. So I know it's similar to an Amazon locker. So
Yeah.
nothing revolutionary in the technology, but it cut down the time of waiting from 3 to 4 hours to literally 22 seconds. And also, in an age where we're all aware from COVID of social distancing and minimizing human contact, to be able to go into like a frontline healthcare system and be able to access your medication without really having to interact with other humans, um, it's critically important. And again, whilst it's a localized solution, has huge scalability in other communities.
That's a wonderful, wonderful story, and I appreciate so much how this is having an immediate impact because it's de-risking for others and getting folks exactly what they need without putting their health at further risk. I know a lot of the work that you've done is actually global, and one of the things that I
Mhm.
profoundly respect is how, when we think about social impact, it's also about how we influence and inspire our next generations of builders. And part of that also isn't parachuting in with, here's what you need to learn and here's how, but rather, how do we embrace something that the community is passionate about? So, Ian, I'm wondering if we can lean into some more stories and other global examples that you have along those lines.
I think the best example of what you just spoke about, which is kind of hyper localized solutions for that next generation of young people, was a project we worked very closely with in Baltimore. And for those people
Mm-hmm.
watching who may know Baltimore, I mean, Baltimore is a tough city, a very divided city. And one of the things that is a passion point, particularly for the young black kids in West Baltimore, is the whole culture of
Mm-hmm.
dirt bikes, and their form of escapism is to ride, to maintain, to be passionate about those dirt bikes. And often, because those kids are riding them in the sort of downtown areas, sometimes they get victimized, almost criminalized for their passion, and really all they're trying to do is live out that escape that it gives them. And and so
Yeah.
one amazing young girl, and an entrepreneur called Brittany Young, who herself was as an
Mm-hmm.
amazing student when it came to STEM subjects. She even went on, having studied through high school. She even got an internship with NASA, and she basically came back to
Mm-hmm.
Baltimore and thought, how do we harness this passion for dirt bikes into a way that will grow these young
Yeah.
people? And so she developed a program that used the technology of dirt bikes. And again, that's mechanical technology, that's not digital technology. But she used
Yeah.
the maintenance and the mechanics of dirt bikes to get young kids interested in STEM. So to get them to really think critically, so they develop critical thinking, problem solving, and a real passion for how things work, to pull things apart, understand things from the
Yeah.
inside. And she's now worked with thousands of young kids in the Baltimore inner city area. A lot of those kids have now grown on to become teachers in her program, and so now
Okay.
there's this culture of seeing dirt bikes not just as a means of escape, but a means of growth from an educational point of view.
Right. Yeah. That's wonderful. And when we talk about for the community, by the community, I just think that's just such a stunning example of it, because there's a degree of ownership that you don't have if someone just parachutes in and says, "Well, you've got to do this, and STEM is important," because you're actually giving me context that I care about. And I love how she's actually taken sort of the next generation of entrepreneurs to almost train the trainers. I think that's a core part of sustainability.
Exactly. No, it's a critical part of making it sustainable, because until you empower the people in the communities, as we said earlier, to be the owners of those solutions, it becomes it becomes really
Yeah.
unsustainable if that constantly relies on resources and input from the outside. So it's really about building the capacity, giving
Yeah.
access to resources to those people in the communities to make it sustainable.
Yeah. Absolutely. So let's actually lean in more to that notion of building the capacity and getting that sustainability, because I do think education is so critical, and all too often we miss that part of the digital divide is the folks that need it the most don't have access to the resources that they need to move forward. So can you tell us more from your global collection of amazing stories of folks that have made so much of a difference, where you've seen that in action from an education
Yeah,
point
well,
of view?
again, coming back to South Africa, there's a great example of an entrepreneur we've worked with for about 6 years now, called Zakeni Ngubo. And he grew up in a part of South Africa which is predominantly Zulu speaking, and the Zulu language is probably spoken by more people than English in South Africa. And the challenge, particularly in those both in the rural communities and the township communities, is there's an absence of Zulu speaking maths and science teachers. And Zakeni, who was an amazingly bright kid when he was growing up, he kind of aced most of his subjects, but he failed maths at high school because he didn't have a teacher for the last 3 years of high school. So he kind of set upon the task of making sure that that never happened to any other kid again. So what he did was thought, well, there are only a few really, really good Zulu speaking maths and science teachers in the country. So why can't we give every Zulu speaking
Mm-hmm.
kid access to those teachers? So once he'd found the teachers, he got them to record on video the entire grade 10, 11, and 12
Okay.
maths and science curriculum. Then, having created that content, he then created a very simple system where it was a hub, just a digital, literally like a local area network that was installed in schools
Yeah.
throughout that province of South Africa, which is KwaZulu Natal. And he put it in hundreds of schools. And because the cost of data, those kids can't afford, they don't have mobile plans and data plans. So this was basically simple technology,
Right.
local area network, wireless technology. The kids were given smartphones or tablets, and they could all access that content and either watch it live or download it
Mm-hmm.
and take it home. And importantly, what that did was allowed the school and Zakeni and his business to see not just who were the high performing students in the grades, but who were the kids who were
Right.
accessing that content on a regular basis. Who of them were really trying hard to make the most of that content, and that really helped identify kids
Yeah.
who were very worthy of bursaries and scholarships for higher education. So again, it's all around a
Right.
hyper localized solution, to a very localized language solution.
Yeah.
But the principles of it are so transferable about allowing people through, through online education, something that is just growing in leaps and bounds. But again, in a way that makes it accessible to those under-resourced communities.
Yeah, and I love how there's this notion of we build in with scale, right? It's not just simply we need to push in more resources, we need to have more resources to do this, but how do we actually get to a meaningful way for scale of the community? And then having data to start to say, here's who we've identified are those top
Mm-hmm.
performers that we want to make sure we can continue to take forward. I just think that that's so critical. In doing this. So for folks that are watching our lightning talk, what are the key things that they need to think about? Coming back to your initial point that sometimes there's a lot of well-intentioned folks that sort of miss the mark because that whole idea of truly empowering the community and letting them have the dignity of owning the solution gets lost in the, oh, but we've done it
Yeah.
before, just do it like we have. Like, what kind of takeaways have you got for
Okay,
folks who
that's
are
a
tuning
great
in?
question. I think the thing we always say is just shut up and listen. We too often we're ready to bring our own solutions, but here we're dealing with people who live with these problems every single day, who understand the complexities
Yeah,
and the kind of systemic nature of those problems. And for us to think that we can
yeah,
understand them just by coming in and having a couple of conversations, you've really got to suspend judgment, suspend those preconceptions, and just learn to listen. And we always
mm-hmm.
say to our entrepreneurs, you've got to learn to be married to the problem, not married to the solution, because the solution might change.
Yeah,
But if you're really married to the
yeah,
problem, then you'll understand it in all its complexity. So rule number one, listen hard. And rule number two, again,
mm-hmm.
where to make this sustainable, it's not sustainable for resourced communities, resourced societies to constantly be be trying
Yeah,
to solve the problems for other people. Until we build agency, until we build self-efficacy into those
right.
entrepreneurs and self-belief, we're never going to solve anything in a meaningful way.
Yes.
So again, we need to park our egos and really work on the capacity building of those entrepreneurs. And it is, like I said earlier, it's a tough journey. Not only are you taking on the challenge
Yeah.
of being an entrepreneur, which can be tough enough on its own, but when you're taking on board the burdens of your community and a sense of responsibility to that community, it can be really tough. So you need to be very strong in your well-being, your physical well-being, your emotional well-being, your mental well-being.
Yes.
You've really got to develop those kind of human reflexes, that resilience. So unless you really
Yeah.
focus on yourself and your personal sustainability, we have a phrase where it's you can't pour from an empty cup. And like we spoke about
Yeah.
earlier, Eileen, what they say on the aeroplanes, put your own mask on before helping others. Unless you do that, then the whole thing isn't going to be sustainable. So we're really interested in building sustainable entrepreneurs who then build sustainable enterprises and have sustainable impact in their communities.
Wonderful. Well, this has been so helpful. And Ian, thank you for taking us through the journey of folks that you've seen grow and scale and how you've supported them. And thank you, everyone, for joining us and tuning in to this Lightning Talk.
Thanks, Ellie.